Well, we're going to talk about the power and petrol markets and industry a little bit, but just a few items still from the market. Today, the 11th OTC FX futures contract will mature and settle at the FMDQ OTC Securities Exchange. This is talking about the currencies market. The notional amount of this 11th OTC futures contract is $253 million of contract. That will be maturing today. $253 million of the FX futures contract will mature and settle today. We expect the central bank later today to replace this contract with a new instrument that will have a different amount and, of course, a tenor. We'll get all that around the closing market close. In the meantime, news is on the street that one of Nigeria's tier one lender, UBA, is seeking between $350 and $500 million in senior medium-term note, 5-year fixed rate. The global marketplace, according to Fitch ratings, Fitch has just assigned a B expected rating to UBA's senior notes, which the lender is proposing as a senior unsecured medium-term notes. The Fitch rating says, based on its own assessment, the expected recovery is in the liquidation ratio and expected recovery rating RR of RR4 EXP, which is the expected recovery, is also assigned to the notes that will be issued by UBA, implying an average recovery prospects. The notes will constitute senior unsecured of UBA obligations and will be used for general corporate purposes. UBA is now the second commercial bank in Nigeria in just 2 weeks to approach the global marketplace seeking bonds. Zenith Bank is putting $500 million and now UBA says between $350 and $500 million is what the lender will be seeking from global investors to use for general corporate purposes of banking. 2 Nigerian banks are now seeking close to $1 billion from the global marketplace. Let's move on to the oil and gas sector, where energy is the key conversation. The big seven remain largely lackluster on the second trading day of the week. Corn oil, Forte Oil, Mobil, and MRS were largely unchanged at the close of the market, despite the volume of transactions you see on the far right of your TV screen. Owando was down 1.10%. 9 naira flat at the closing, but Seplat was unchanged 372.70, and Total was the green shoot 3.70%, back at 260 price level. If you put all of that together, including the small caps within that space, we have about 0.75% negative index return for Tuesday. However, that sector is still positive year to date, 11.1%. So we've heard from the Bureau of Statistics about the GDP numbers and where the sticky points are. And of course, we also heard from the Central Bank of Nigeria on Tuesday, 2 very important economic and markets sensitive, indicative reports, as it were. So if you look at inflation that came in for April and the PMI for April as well, if you go back, if we backtrack April to where we are, we've seen a bunch of economic data. So let's put this together. How do power, petrol, and everything feed into the first quarter GDP, the second quarter, the budget 2017 that is on paper and soon to be effective, and of course the full year economic outlook? Eramazele Aziba is one of the investment analysts from Afrinvest and is live here in the studio with us to put some power into the conversation. Good morning.
Good morning, boss.
It's good to have you.
Thank you.
If you look at all the set of data we've seen so far, the PMI, the April inflation, the first quarter GDP, it looks like energy is a recurring decimal in all these reports, isn't it?
Yes. So what we've seen is, yes, like you mentioned, energy still remains a concern, but even looking at GDP reports released yesterday, we saw that in terms of oil production volumes, we actually saw that improve in Q1 2017. It settled at about 1.83 million barrels compared to 1.7 that we had in the fourth quarter of of 2016. Although the 1.83 from the GDP report released yesterday, we've seen that it was stated that the 1.83 is still subject for revision because of the numbers from March. We know that we've seen a lot of improvements. We had a lot of oil disruptions to oil installations in the Niger Delta. We've seen some peace return to that sector, and we've seen oil production improve. So generally, we should see an improvement in performance from that space. Then, if you also consider the fact that the OPEC will be having their meeting tomorrow, talking about extending the production cuts, which will also be beneficial for Nigeria. I mean, over the last week, we've seen oil prices appreciate, and that's a positive for the economy.
But in terms of powering the GDP moving forward, yes, the non-oil sector came out of recession, as it were, yes. In the Q1 GDP that we saw yesterday. The oil sector remained slightly underwater on a year-on-year basis. That was much deeper. But the non-oil sector was recovering. And if we're going to power the key sectors that drove the non-oil out of recession in Q1, which is ICT, manufacturing, agriculture, and trade. Even for trade, you need electricity for your warehouses and some storage, isn't it?
Yes, that's also key. So yes, the power sector also plays a key role. But in terms of looking at the industrial sector, for most of the big players that you have there, they aren't necessarily reliant on power that is generated within the country. Most of them run generators on their power plants because they can't afford to have their plants shut down for any reason. So it's mostly just like their administrative offices and all. But looking at for smaller players in the industrial, in those sectors, it would actually be beneficial for them if we can address some of these power issues that we are currently having. I mean, when you see aggregate transmission